So one of my friends wrote a fanfiction, and I read it, and I liked it quite a bit, so I decided that I was going to read it for YouTube. It's called The Blonde Ray of Sunshine. It's set in the Pokemon world. It's about an original character named Antoshi. Antoshi being a portmanteau of his own name, Anthony, and Satoshi, the Pokemon trainer, and his Typhlosion. Anyway, I'm going to be reading the story. I'll be covering one chapter per video. And without further ado, let's get started. I'll leave a link to where you can read this on an archive of our own in the video description, assuming I remember. If you want to read ahead, I'll be covering one video per chapter, one chapter per video, something like that. Anyway, without further ado, here we go, Chapter 1. The sun shined down upon the peaceful ocean waters of Sea Route 20. The lapping of the constantly churning ocean mixed with the cries of seagulls and various water Pokemon. Several dugong played on the surface of the water while Mantine breached the surface of the water and soared short distances. A small group of Hoppa drifted along the winds high overhead, so I'm one paragraph in and I'm already screwing this up. Perfect. In the distance came the sound of a motor. The dugong looked over before diving under as it approached. A large yacht sped westward, carrying a handful of young Pokemon trainers on its deck. Some were seated in the built-in lounge. I don't know where I got the high from. Others rested against the railing to look out at the sea. That included a grinning young boy wearing a red polo shirt, his blonde hair whipping around in the winds. His name was Antoshi. Over a year had passed since Antoshi left his home in the suburbs of Saffron City to start his journey as a trainer. The 12-year-old boy traveled countless miles across the majority of Kanto. His penultimate quest was to collect all 8 badges and reach the Indigo Plateau for the opportunity to win the league's semi-annual tournament, and face the reigning champion in a battle. After having defeated the gym leaders in Fuchsia City, he had 6 badges to his name. He was on his way towards Cinnabar Island for the 7th. The boat's motor and the sound of crashing waves against the hull were louder than he expected. Yet he kept a huge smile upon his face, fueled by the excitement and anticipation. The early spring air mixed with the sea salt and salt of the sea, salt of the sea, whipped wildly at him. The smell of the sea breeze was refreshing and not something they gotten very often on this journey, having frequently spent their time camping out in the woods or sleeping in Pokemon centers. An invigorating breeze carried the end of the winter's cold. It was always his favorite time of the year, even though his birthday was in the summer. The bitter coldness and snowy days of winter had passed. Clear, sunny days were left in its wake. Though he was comfortable in the solitude of the forest that he had to travel through, I'm not going to be doing a professional audiobook or anything like that, in case you didn't pick up on that. Anyway, there was always something awe-inspiring for him about this grand openness of the sea and the deep electric blue that surrounded him. Common flying fish jumped alongside the boat. Sea water splashing away from the boat glistened bright like diamonds under the sun's rays. It kept him euphoric and eager for unknown adventures waiting for him in the far distance. This is so amazing, Antoshi remarked, seemingly to himself. Besides him, a much larger figure groaned wearily, hanging onto the railing for dear life. Sure, it's nice, the boy's partner replied. But why do boats have to move so much? And are we hitting a bunch of rocks? It was Typhlosion, the volcano Pokemon. The volcano Pokemon, and it was talking to him. If you hear any page-turning noises, I did print this out, because I do find it easier to read on paper than on screens. You'll be fine, Antoshi reassured him, chuckling. The ride shouldn't last too long. This boat's pretty fast. The other trainers were unable to hear them talk over the ambient noise. Too fast and too bumpy for me. Just then, Fireball's eyes went wide with horror. Uh-oh. He held a paw over his mouth and he quickly made for the cabin and darted inside. Antoshi watched him before smiling and heaving a sigh. It was the first time he and Fireball had needed to take a boat ride on their journey. He gazed back out at the water, continuing to eagerly soak in the brief trip at sea. He grinned and laughed as he saw shimmering red and blue rooftops from a small bloom of blue rooftops. Red and blue tops from a bloom of tentacle and tentacruel peek out from the water. His heart swelled with joy as he held onto the rail, strolling farther down the ship to follow them, watching as they calmly drifted on by. He sighed happily, resting on the rail once more to watch the world go by with a proud smile upon his face. Fireball headed back outside to see his friend smiling to himself in a moment of tranquil content. Seeing Antoshi so cheerful rubbed off on him. He always viewed Antoshi as a natural-born leader. Much of his own inner strength was derived from the young trainer's adamant confidence and resolve. The two had forged the unbreakable bond of friendship since Antoshi's childhood. Fireball was Antoshi's best friend and partner, his only partner, the only Pokemon accompanying Antoshi, and the only one he ever needed. Through sheer determination, grit, and some luck, The duo were able to win most of their battles, to the chagrin and astonishment of trainers they faced along the way. Fireball stood by his friend's side once again, and Toshi looked at him with a cheeky smile. Feeling better? I think so, Fireball replied with a groan. I'm just glad we didn't eat before this. And Toshi laughed, prompting his friend to perk up and laugh along with him. At that point, some of the other trainers on board had begun hearing Antoshi conversing and laughing. Some of them stared at the boy in confusion, incredulous that Antoshi appeared to be talking to his Pokemon. Antoshi first discovered he could communicate with Fireball on the night upon obtaining the first badge together. The elation of winning their very first badge had Antoshi quite emotional. Upon reminiscing with Fireball about how much they had been through together and how much Fireball means to him, Fireball spoke. Not in the usual barks or growls he was used to hearing, but in actual words. Antoshi was stunned, as was Fireball when he realized Antoshi understood him. Through a number of awkward interactions with others, Antoshi realized that he was the only human he knew who could communicate with his Pokemon. It was inexplicable to either of them, but over time, it became as natural as just two friends talking casually. The two partners often talked to one another about any little thing that came to mind, usually to pass the time or to stave off boredom. When around earshot of other people, they usually kept their verbal interactions to a minimum. After nearly a year and a half of journeying together, the two were as close as brothers. A couple hours later, the boats reached the marina of Cinnabar Island. After docking, the captain of the boat, a friendly sailor named Sean, lowered the gangplank and headed off to tie down and anchor his vessel. Then he guided the others to disembark as well. Here we are, passengers, he announced as they all calmly made their way onto land. Welcome to Cinnabar Island. I hope you enjoyed your ride here. If anybody would like to make a donation for the ride, please feel free to do so. If you donate, remember to keep enough for yourself to buy food and supplies for you and your Pokemon. Good luck on your journey. Most of the trainers handed Sean a few thousand Pokédollars as compensation. Antoshi and Fireball were the last two off the boat. Thank you so much, Antoshi said, standing on the wooden docks and handing Sean some money. It's no problem, young man, Sean replied with a grateful nod of the head. Now get out there and make your dreams come true. Antoshi smiled confidently. Antoshi confidently grinned. I will. He and Fireball then departed, continuing their journey on an island they'd never been to before. Fireball walked side by side with his friend. Being upright was not an issue for Typhlosion, who had gotten used to walking alongside Antoshi for the greater portion of their journey. Fireball was an abnormally large Typhlosion, standing just over 6 feet tall. On his hind feet, he towered over Antoshi. The marina, situated on the east coast of Cinnabar, was equally as bustling as the one on Route 19. Once they were able to reach its exit, they both gasped in astonishment. They found themselves standing on the edge of a lush, sprawling tropical paradise amid the glow of afternoon sun. Tall palm trees lined the paved streets, and the flourished with people, Pokemon, and cars. Amid the sound of the rolling tide, melodious squawks of parrots echoed around them. A small flock of Pidgey flew over their heads, directing their attention to the tall buildings. Similar to what they were used to seeing in Saffron City, though nowhere near as numerous. That's enough. Everyone seemed so carefree, like every day that was just a day at the beach. Antoshi grinned thoughtfully at the sight, absolutely loving it. The visage of beautiful island that was everything he'd dreamed it would be before becoming a Pokemon trainer. Traveling to new places, seeing things he'd never seen before, taking in other people's way of life. It was a huge part of the journey for him. Can we move here? Fireball idly asked. The duo's eyes continued to look around in awe. This place is really amazing, Antoshi remarked. He readjusted his large red backpack that held various essentials for them both. Looks like we can do a little sightseeing here in the spare time we have. Fireball's eyes widened as he spotted the various food and snack vendors along the sandy beachside pathway. What about a little snacking? I see a cart over there selling ice cream. Antoshi chuckled. I see your stomach is settled. Alright, 1 ice cream cone. Fireball's fist pumped in victory, accompanying Antoshi and went over to the ice cream vendor. A cheerful man wearing an apron and a straw fedora greeted the two. What can I get ya? Antoshi casually pointed to Fireball. My friend here wants to choose. Ah, buying a treat for your Pokemon. It's not often I see that. Most Pokemon don't, sit well with ice cream. Fireball can eat anything, he replied with a smirk. Fireball hummed thoughtfully, looking over the different varieties carefully. He gasped and began frantically pointing to one. Nice choice, the vendor said, spinning an ice cream scoop in his hand. 1 double chocolate chip banana fudge swirl coming up. Fireball could barely keep still as he watched the man scoop out a large roll of ice cream. He centered it atop a waffle cone before handing it over to Typhlosion. His clawed fingers wiggled eagerly as he reached out for it and took it, staring at it in amazement for a moment. Waffle cone, Fireball whispered in awe. A cone made of my favorite food. Anything else? The man asked. Water, please, Antoshi replied. The vendor handed Antoshi a cold bottle of water from the storage compartment in his cart. Antoshi took out his wallet from his back pocket to pay the man, and the two continued on their way. Fireball took a long lick of ice cream and savored it. Then he casually placed the whole treat, cone and all, into his, loudly crunching on it. I assume Anthony meant to write into his mouth or something along those lines, because it just says into his. Antoshi took a sip of water, glancing over at Fireball. So delicious, Fireball remarked in bliss. He then stretched out his arms wide and sighing happily. Okay. Thank you, Antoshi. I love this place already. Antoshi grinned, happy to see Fireball happy. He had initially kept Fireball in a Pokeball. After a while of having no one else to accompany him on lonely roads, he began to take Fireball out of his Pokeball more and more until eventually Fireball became his constant traveling companion. Fireball took in everything Antoshi did, especially eating, which had become Fireball's most favorite pastime. The two are completely inseparable. The two strolled down the city's busy sidewalk, stopping briefly at a crosswalk. This place really rebuilt and regrew since the volcano destroyed everything, Antoshi said, placing the cap back on his water. Both of them observed the colossal volcano looming in the distance. Fireball hummed thoughtfully before they safely crossed the street. You told me that was decades... You told me that was decades ago, wasn't it? Antoshi nodded in surprise, reaching the opposite side of the street. The duo absorbed into the crowd of Antoshi nodded in surprise, reaching the opposite side of the street, the duo absorbed into the crowd of pedestrians and Pokemon. Alright. Yeah, but it's still amazing to see how far it's come from starting at a small beach resort. I remember one of my school books showed pictures of what Cinnabar looked like after the eruption. It wasn't pretty, but because of it, the island is actually bigger and more beautiful than it was before. Guess that's why there's so many tall buildings and stuff. Both of them strolled along in the shadows of those very high rises looming overhead. Well, let's go find the Pokemon Center. After that, we can ask them how to get to the Cinnabar Gym. Oh yeah, Fireball exclaimed. I'm ready. Antoshi found the litter receptacle to drop his empty water bottle into. A friendly robotic voice in the bin thanked him before he reached into his pocket, the side pocket of his backpack. He pulled out his trusty travel-size Kanto compendium, weathered by heavy usage. It was a source of information for each city and the routes that they visited. Not only was it a map, but it had directions, people, and places of interest, as well as various other information like weather patterns and local Pokemon. With it, Antoshi was able to ascertain which way they needed to go to find one of Cinnabar's Pokemon centers. They used the locations almost like home bases. The centers allowed trainers to reside in one of their living quarters for up to 24 hours free of charge. It gave them access to shelter, storage, free food, and a bed. Looks like it's only a few blocks away, Antoshi said, leading his friend towards their destination. Once they reached the Pokemon Center's automatic glass doors, they headed into the cool, air-conditioned building. Gentle music played on the intercom system. The duo smiled at the sight of this somewhat busy location. They always felt at home in the splendorous main area, typical of Pokemon Centers. It was akin to an oversized living room with a tall, curved glass wall in the front of bearing its trademark P. Various trainers walked around freely, talking, laughing, and playing with their Pokemon. Antoshi and Fireball headed towards the station counter to speak to Nurse Joy. Fortunately for the two, the center had a few available rooms for them to stay in. Antoshi took out his wallet and handed Nurse Joy his trainer card. She scanned it to verify his credentials. Vercees remarked the time and date of his last known location. It was an invaluable tool for letting his parents keep track of him on his journey. She handed it back to him along with a plastic key. Please enjoy your stay here, Nurse Joy said to them with a warm smile. Remember, supper is served at 6, lights out is at 10, and there is absolutely no battling allowed inside. We have a stadium behind the building for that. Antoshi chuckled as he put his wallet away. Yeah, we get that at every Pokemon Center we go to. He then looked up at Fireball with a smirk. Fireball and I had a little incident back at Cerulean City. He used to have a temper problem. Hey, that loudmouth mudkip was asking for trouble, Fireball spitefully muttered, frowning. Antoshi's journey around Kanto started out as an interest in seeing new places and training Fireball, who was still a Quilava back then. Along the way, however, Antoshi had to continue curbing Fireball's unrestrained temperament. He was prone to reckless fits of excitability and hostility. With only one Pokemon, they were forced to trade almost constantly early on in order to succeed, far more than they would have if they had filled out their roster. Let me bend this page back so I can see it a little better. Where was I? However, Fireball became more disobedient as his power, speed, and defenses rapidly grew to an incredible level. On more than one occasion, Fireball refused to listen to Antoshi's commands. Regardless, Antoshi did not give up on Fireball and their adventure. Nurse Joy quietly laughed. All of us are required to inform you of that. I got an on-screen alert about it when I scanned your card. As long as your Pokemon don't cause any more problems, you're in no trouble. Thank you very much, Nurse Joy, Antoshi replied. Come on, Fireball. Let's go get settled. Fireball nodded and followed Antoshi down the nearby hallway. Antoshi tapped the key against the scanner of the door to the room, causing the door to automatically unlock and allow them in. The two sighed in content as Antoshi closed the door behind them. The room was small and sparsely decorated, yet cozy. Antoshi took off his heavy pack and placed it on the bed before stretching out his arms high. Now is as good a time as any to call Mom and Dad to let them know we're alright, Antoshi said. They sure do like to worry, Fireball replied. Antoshi laughed knowingly as they headed back out into the main area. Hello, Antoshi. Oh, I missed a paragraph. They found an unoccupied video phone for Antoshi to sit in front of. He placed his trainer card against the screen, instantly lighting it up with his list of registered contacts, though his list only had one. He tapped the home contact and the phone dialed. The ringing tone played just once before his mother quickly answered. Hello, Antoshi, she cheerfully exclaimed, waving to him. Hey, son, his father added, standing behind him. Antoshi chuckled, he and Fireball waving back to them. We got the alert on our tracker a few minutes ago that you signed into the Cinnabar Island Pokemon Center, his mother explained, holding up a small electronic device that displayed Antoshi's trainer card and his current location. You guys wait by the phone every time that happens, huh? The boy asked with a jovial smirk. Every time, she exuberantly exclaimed. How is it there? I'll bet it's beautiful. It really is. Fireball and I would love to stay and visit here longer, but the date of the Indigo League tournament is almost here, and we're so close to finishing our run. This is definitely the year we're going, Mom. Fireball and I can feel it. Oh goodness, she said with an emotional pride in her voice. I'm so excited and so nervous for you, Antoshi. I know you and Fireball are going to do your absolute best. We sure will, Antoshi said as he looked over at Fireball, who confidently nodded. Well, we don't want to take up any more of your time, Antoshi, his dad chimed in. You know how clingy your mother gets, he added with a guffaw. She cut her eyes at her husband, then quickly nodded in defeat. Okay, so I am clingy, she admitted, the others laughing in response. She gave her son a warm smile. That's only because we love you so much, Antoshi. It's always so wonderful when I get to see my big boy's shining face. Antoshi blushed and chuckled coyly, hoping no one nearby heard her remarks. We're behind you 100%, Antoshi, his dad remarked. Love you both, Antoshi said, grinning. Talk to you again soon. The screen displayed the call ending before turning off. Antoshi sighed happily before he looked up at his friend with a confident grin. You ready to go for that 7th badge, buddy? Do you even have to ask? Fireball replied with a smirk, sharing a quick fist bump with Antoshi. They headed back to Nurse Joy to ask for directions to the gym, since his map was stored away in their room. She informed them that it was the red building closest to the base of the volcano. Antoshi thanked her once again, and the two were promptly on their way. On foot, it took a couple of hours to reach the gym. They didn't mind the long trek as, along their way, they were able to experience some more sights of the city. Should drink water once in a while. Don't mind me. It will hopefully make it sound a little bit less like I have a frog in my throat. Where was I? The late afternoon sun cast an orange glow upon the new surroundings. They saw street performers, artists, and even hula dancers, which they stopped briefly to watch. The dancers flowed in sync with each other, as well as their Pansage, Panseer, and Panpour. Antoshi was quickly taken by surprise when one of the dancers, a young lady, came up to him. He blushed and blinked incredulously as she placed a layer in the style of comfy around his neck, a typical offering for tourists on the island. Fireball grinned, snickering as he watched his friend coyly staring at her. He smiled at him, she smiled at him, Antoshi responding with a demure smile of his own. She giggled and then took her place back in the small dancing troupe. And Toshi has a crush, and Toshi has a crush. Fireball teased him with a cheeky grin as they began to walk away. Ask her to travel with us. And Toshi put his hands in his pockets and kept his gaze locked on the ground, embarrassed. Fireball typically teased him whenever he could for how shy his friend was around girls his age. I am not going to ask her to travel with us, Antoshi muttered. Fireball held back a chortle. You should go back there and ask her on a date. I'll chaperone you. Will you knock it off? Antoshi snapped, causing Fireball to burst out laughing. Antoshi groaned. Fortunately for Antoshi, they were nearing closer to the gym, which prompted the Typhlosion to put on a serious face. They crossed the street and stood before the modest red building that simply read Gym over the front doors made of glass. It was the building that would bring them one step closer to their dream. Lucky number 7, Antoshi remarked as they thoughtfully studied the building. Let's go! The two of them confidently marched up to the automatic glass doors. Before they slid open, however, they ended up walking face first into the glass. The pair froze in place, dumbfounded as they were pressed up against the doors. With his voice muffled, Fireball asked, Is it open? Just then, they heard a computerized chirp next to them. They peeled themselves away from the door to see a screen light up on the wall next to the door. Welcome, trainer, a digitized female voice said. Two curiously stood in front of the monitor to see a pixelated woman's head. This is the Cinnabar Island Gym. If you wish to challenge this gym's leader, you'll need to have sharp battling skills and a sharp mind. You will find monitors like this one throughout the gym, each one in front of a set of locked doors. You are required to answer a question displayed on the screen by tapping one of the 4 multiple choice answers. You have only 30 seconds to make a choice. Get it right, and you will move on to the next room. Get it wrong, or let the time run out, and you will have to battle the trainer stationed in each room to progress further. If you wish to keep your Pokemon in tip-top shape to battle the leader, you'd best answer correctly. After a brief pause, Fireball gazed over to his friend. Is this what school is like? And Toshi chuckled. Yeah, but with a lot less pressure. I just hope whatever questions are asked, we can come up with the correct answer. Question number 1, the digitized female voice loudly spoke, causing them to jump in surprise. Which gym are you at right now? The screen displayed each choice, which included Cinnamon, Cranberry, and Cyndaquil. Does that say Cyndaquil? Fireball asked curiously. Pick that one. And Toshi smirked before tapping Cinnabar. That's correct, you may proceed inside. The doors with the froggy imprint of the duo's bodies slid open, granting the two access. Don't get too excited, though, the computer added. The questions are only going to get tougher. Thank you, lady on the screen, Fireball said cheerfully, waving to the computer. The pair headed inside, and the doors slid closed behind them. Inside the gym, they were greeted by a blast of cold, circulated air. The two felt very tiny standing below the incredibly tall ceiling. The floor was patterned with red and white tiles. The gym was kept clean and shiny as if it was brand new. They headed up to a small set of stairs which brought them to the first open room. The fire breather sat on a chair on the opposite side of the room of the monitor, sound asleep. They decided not to wake him up, until the loud monitor came to life. Welcome, trainer, the digitized lady exclaimed, arousing the fire-breathing trainer from his sleep. As they headed to the monitor, the fire breather yawned and slowly stood up. From behind his back, he pulled out a Pokeball, expanded it, and tossed it up and down while eagerly awaiting for the pair to answer the next question. Which of the following is true? The display showed the choices. Fire is stronger against water. There are 9 certified Pokemon League badges. Arbok evolves into Seviper, and quizzes are fun. Page tuner sounds, gotta love them. I don't know if you can actually hear that or not. And Toshi quirked an eyebrow. This is a trivia question. Fireball hummed in thought. His reading comprehension was poor and he didn't understand everything on the screen. Seems tough, he remarked, uncertain of which answer to choose. And Toshi shook his head in amusement and tapped the 4th answer. Correct again, the computer told them as the next set of automatic doors opened. Now move on to the next room. As Antoshi and Fireball went ahead, the fire breather shrugged and sat back down in his chair to resume his napping. Antoshi had a studious knowledge of Pokemon, having read many books about training, Pokemon biology, and their natures. He also subscribed to various magazines targeting trainers, many of which contained maps of of locations in the Kanto region. Because of his studies and over a year experience as a trainer, the quizzes found in each subsequent room were nothing more than a small hindrance on his and Fireball's journey to obtain their 7th badge. The questions indeed became progressively harder, and the time limit forced him to think fast. Where are Wild Jinx found? And can Umbreon learn Sucker Punch? There were also slight trick questions like how many cities in Kanto, which required him to not factor in any of the towns. He remained calm and strategic, and as he usually was when he battled, carefully choosing each answer. Each room's fire-type specialist trainer was eager and ready for battle, but Antoshi continued picking correct answers. The gym's trainers were left with dashed hopes and irritated grumblings for being denied a battle to break the monotony. While sympathetic to their boredom, Antoshi was more focused on getting his one Pokemon through to the gym leader unscathed. After clearing a dozen quiz machines, the final set of automatic doors opened to reveal a large battling stadium. The duo's hopes swelled with excitement. They'd reached the end. Finally! Fireball exclaimed. My brain hurts after all those questions. You didn't answer any of them, Antoshi incredulously remarked. Exactly! On the opposite side of the stadium, along the far wall, a person in a white lab coat lay napping on a sofa. The pair looked around as they calmly approached the challenger's side of the field. They took their marks on the opposite side of a gigantic Pokeball etched into the ground, poised confidently and ready for battle. They waited for several minutes. I'll bet this is some kind of strategy, Antoshi whispered to his friend. All of those trivia questions, then forcing us to wait patiently until they're ready. It's a plan to wear us down. Fireball nodded in agreement. They waited some more. Page is bent. And they continued to wait until their shoulders were both slumped over from boredom. Are you sure this is strategy? Fireball curiously asked. Absolutely not, Antoshi thoughtfully replied before clearing his throat. Excuse me. Hello? Huh? A feminine voice responded from the couch. The gym leader in the coat sat up and stretched, yawning loudly. I didn't know there was a challenger. The sound of battling usually wakes me up. The person stood up from the couch, a girl in her teens. She wore dark black glasses and a conspicuous bald cap that did little to hide the long orange hair that reached the small of her back. She also sported a long graying mustache on her upper lip. I see now. You guys went the boring, brainy route, didn't you? She said sarcastically. That's pretty lame. Pretty smart, but pretty lame. Most challengers to my gym like to get their hands dirty and battle as many of my trainers as they can. Then I get to pick them off as easy because their Pokemon are weak by the time they get here. Nice job, Brainy. Antoshi was briefly taken aback. But you require people to use those trivia machines. It even said that you'd have to have a sharp mind to get through the gym. Well, yeah. People like you are so boring though. A lot of trainers go through at least one battle here. Sheesh. Fireball blinked curiously, keeping his voice low. Is that a mustache? I didn't even know girls could grow mustaches, Antoshi replied. It's not a real mustache, you stupid person, she stumbled, angered. She noticed the lei that Antoshi was wearing and became increasingly arrogant. You're lucky I'm even entertaining a challenge for some goofy tourist who wandered inside my gym. Antoshi and Fireball looked at each other in confusion. I'm not some tourist, Antoshi countered. I'm a trainer with 6 badges. Blah blah blah, she replied, mocking him with her hand. So what, you've got 6 badges, but I don't see any extra Pokeballs on you. You're not going to get any farther with just one Pokemon. Antoshi smirked. You're not the first person to tell us that, he confidently replied. And you shouldn't be the last we prove wrong. This is our life's work you're facing, our heart and soul. Fireball then tapped Antoshi on the shoulder to get his attention before pointing to the mustache on her face. By the way, why are you wearing that? Everything. She folded her arms across her chest. Ha! You silly tourist, you don't even recognize who I look like. You look like... Antoshi trailed off, remembering her attire from one of the trainer magazines. Wait a minute, you're dressed like one of the leaders who used to run this gym, Blaine. She laughed haughtily. That's right, Brainy. I happen to be his great-great-granddaughter. In spirit, she added with an awkward cough. Antoshi and Fireball both quirked an eyebrow. Okay, I'm not actually a descendant of his, but Blaine has been a hero of mine ever since I learned about the history of our amazing island and our legendary trainers. I promised myself that I would become the most amazing and powerful fire-type trainer that Cinnabar has to offer. And guess what? I did. After the previous gym leader retired a couple months ago, I took her place, and here I am. I'm kinda new as a gym leader, but you're still in for a scorching battle. My name is Blair, but you can call me Blair the Magnificent. The duo blankly stared at her, stunned. That's kinda cool, Fireball remarked, and kinda creepy too. Blair spun around on her heel in such a way that her long coat flopped dramatically. So, what's a know-nothing tourist doing standing before me and with one Pokemon, huh? You wouldn't be so foolish enough to face Blair the Magnificent, would you? Antoshi was dumbfounded at how obvious the answer was. He He stopped himself, sighing in defeat and momentarily hanging his head down. He quickly perked back up and looked at her with a confident expression. I am Antoshi, a trainer from Saffron City, and yes, I wish to challenge you for the Volcano Badge. Antoshi? Blair wondered aloud with a scoff. That's an odd name like I've ever heard before. He smiled and shrugged. I get that a lot. As per Indigo League rules, I'm required to inform you that if you lose this match, you can't request a rematch for another 7 days. I know that one by now, Antoshi replied. Okay, Brainy, Blair replied, grinning confidently, her dark sunglasses shimmering. Then, as an official gym leader of the official Cinnabar Island Gym, I, Blair the Magnificent, do officially accept your challenge. Blair threw down her first Ultra Ball high with a theatric flair. The ball opened in midair, a bright light bursting from it in what took the shape of a large dragon-like Pokemon. As the light faded, her imposing Charizard landed on the ground with a heavy thud. It gave a mighty roar, a stream of flames erupting from its mouth. Blair caught the ball as it returned to her person like a sentient boomerang. She held it at her side, smirking confidently. Antoshi's eyes lit up as he grinned eagerly, feeling his blood race with excitement while staring down his competition. Starting off strong, he quietly remarked to himself. Then he nodded to his friends. Alright, Fireball, go get him! And that's it for Chapter 1. I shall be reading the next chapters in the subsequent videos. I do hope you all enjoyed this. Join me in the next part where I'll be taking on Chapter 2 and Antoshi will be facing the gym leader. My name is Dragonite, and I will see you all later.